Back when I first started playing cash game poker, things were a lot different. The micro stakes were basically like playing play money, and all you had to do was just show up and just not be a complete donkey, and you'd win. Today, things have changed. Most micro stakes players have done at least a little bit of research, or have found some charts, or have some kind of basic strategy to follow. The number of fish in the games is just getting fewer and farther between. However, that doesn't mean that you can't still win easily at the micro stakes. You just need to stick to a few guidelines in order to succeed. Here are my top 8 tips for crushing the micro stakes so that you can move up as soon as possible. The micros is not a place to be fancy in your play. You aren't there to impress anyone. Besides, trying to level a bunch of players playing on level 0 or even level 1 pretty absurd when you think about it. Instead, you should mostly play on level 2 just as a default, which basically means that you just play based on what you think your opponents have in their hand. The main key here is to overwhelm your opponents with adherence to the fundamentals and not try to outplay them in marginal spots. One rule of thumb is if you are not 100% sure that a particular decision is decisively plus EV, you should probably be trying to keep that pot small. There are 3 core fundamentals in poker: position, initiative, and pressure. Players at the micros tend to call and play out of position way too much. Capitalize on this by playing more hands in late position. Because poker at its core is a battle of the blinds. If you focus most of your attention on stealing spots, the rest tends to take care of itself. Basically, raise as many hands as you can within reason, while calling as little as possible out of position in the blinds. Most micro stakes regs play horribly in the blinds, so you can capitalize on this by playing more hands in position than they do. So don't feel pressured to defend your blinds aggressively. There aren't usually going to be that many people following an aggressive stealing strategy like you are, so there's really no need to go crazy with defending. The great thing about playing this way is that it teaches you to look for spots to be aggressive in and doesn't allow you to fall into a trap of being overly passive. You want to avoid nearly all passive play and strive to be aggressive in every single decision you make. This leads me to our next subject. Only a few years ago, even mentioning this concept would have been pretty silly, right? I mean, reg battles at the micros? You gotta be kidding me, right? Now it's not really a joking matter anymore. There are more regs now than ever have been at the micro stakes. They're using complicated HUDs and trying to exploit the other regs. With this in mind, there's still no need to start making these complicated light 4 bets or fighting marginal hands in 3-bet pots. My advice is to just table select a little bit better than you used to have to at these stakes, and just leave tables where you have these new aged aggro micro stakes players behind you who are obviously just getting out of line and trying to exploit you with the HUD. There is no need to get into unclear battles right now while you are still learning. Instead of trying to attack regs, just try to play equilibrium against them or avoid them, and instead focus on exploiting players with big weaknesses. Stick to the obvious profitable spots and let the fundamentals win for you. There's plenty of time to review these hands later and start learning on how to adjust to these aggressive players then. At the micros, it's perfectly fine to forget about balancing and any of those other advanced concepts. Just bet big with big hands and bet small with your marginal ones. There simply will not be enough people to exploit you at the micro stakes to really worry about it. The amount you gain by getting maximum value and the amount you save when your hand is marginal will more than make up for the 2 guys at your stake that might actually be capable of effectively exploiting your bet sizing. This is a big trap I see a lot of players fall into. They get their heads so far up their HUD that they forget to learn to play poker. My advice is to either play by observation only, don't even use a HUD, or use a very basic HUD. Don't fall into the trap of thinking you need a HUD that gives you deep read on your opponents. First of all, you probably will not even know how to use this information properly. And secondly, while learning the game, you need to be focusing on learning to read a table dynamic that goes beyond HUDs. For example, if a guy has just lost a huge pot and now raises from middle position on the very next hand, you can be fairly sure his ranges might be different than what his HUD says. The vast majority of players still allow recent results to change their play, and they probably always will. I mean, that's just human nature, right? Learn to recognize things like this, and you will be gathering vital information and skills that will help you immensely at small stakes and beyond. The end game of poker is about adjusting to the overall table dynamic better than your opponents. Get started with that way of thinking right now at the micro stakes. Learn to be creative and factor human psychology into your decisions. This is actually probably the most important tip of all I could give you throughout your poker career. I mean, nothing's more important than this. Your bankroll is the lifeblood of your poker career, right? It doesn't really matter what bankroll management plan, whether it's aggressive or conservative. Just pick a plan and stick with it. For building your initial bankroll, I recommend having 30 buy-ins before you move up to your next stake. If you drop below 20 buy-ins, either reload some more money, I mean that is an option here with micros, right? Or just move down until you build back up. Don't ever let your bankroll get low where you have this feeling that your back is against the wall. That will definitely cause tilt issues and make you play bad. It's just guaranteed. Okay, so there are times where it's okay to slow play. For example, like, I don't know, you have a monster hand and you're trapping a maniac. However, at the micros, you should be erring on the side of just aggressively betting your value hands and building that pot in order to maximize value. The biggest sin you can commit at the micro stakes, or pretty much any stake for that matter, is to consistently get the minimum value on your biggest hands. So unless you have a really good reason and can back it up with sound logic, bet or raise relentlessly with your nut hands. Trust me, your win rate will thank you. I know this sounds kind of like odd or counterintuitive, right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't be doing a lot of study when you're learning the game or trying to beat the micro stakes. However, I feel some people just take it too far and study way too much when they're first starting out. A lot of people just end up just learning to speak poker and not really ever learning how to play the actual game. I recommend that you first learn a basic strategy, learn the fundamentals, etc., all that stuff, but then take that information and play a huge amount of volume in order to develop your own style. Start learning to be a feel player right now. It will pay huge dividends later when you face tougher competition. And by feel, I mean building your ranges, deciding on what ranges to play in every situation based on more than just the raw HUD stats you're seeing or whatever. Always consider the history, both past and recent, what's going on right now, before choosing a course of action. I mean, the human element is really what poker is all about, right? This information that you gain by paying attention is called the table dynamic. Also, once you have a ton of experience, you will be better equipped to leak bust your game. I advocate that when you go through a period where you're studying and reading a lot, like probably right now, right? You're making notes, you're coming up with a core game plan, but once you have kind of exhausted, kind of gone brain dead to it, that you've learned all you could learn for right now, right? You need to just go play and play and play. I mean, I suggest that you spend 90% of your time playing for a month or two. And if you get stuck at like 2-0 or 5-0 or whatever, and haven't moved up by the time those couple months are over, just take a break from playing, go study some more, or hire a coach. Do some leak busting, and then go play another large sample size. Just rinse and repeat this process as you go until you are actually beating 25-0 over a pretty significant sample size of like, I don't know, 50,000 or 100,000 hands. Now, once you're doing that, and you actually have this large sample where you're beating 25-0, you can consider yourself an intermediate player. You're no longer a beginner anymore, and you're ready to start taking shots at the small stakes. While micro stakes cash games are getting tougher to beat every year, they are still the best place to learn poker in my opinion. The good news is if you can crush 5NL, 10NL, and 25NL in cash games, say at 6 or 8 big blinds per 100, you will be a much better small stakes player when you actually do move up. You will also be able to beat tournaments or sit and goes or any of these other softer forms of poker convincingly if you choose to change to that format. Ultimately, the hardest workers in poker can still make a lot of money. And the fact that you are watching this video means that you have what it takes to succeed. I hope these tips will help you start crushing the games right now and achieve all of your poker goals. Thanks for watching.